It's 5 after, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good. There's Kurt. So we'll call the meeting to order. Cannabis Working Group. We've got 5 of us up here, and hopefully Eric's still expected to come, and I'm not sure about someone from Klamath. So we're going to basically pick up where we left off. Jesse was just saying he'd like to do a kind of a clean and concise report so that he can present that next week at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And then we also need to talk about future meetings, I guess. I don't know, did we schedule some already or not?
I don't think we have.
We didn't. Okay. And I know I'm busy again next week or out of town Wednesday.
Joel, did you come up with anything?
We have spent the last week, I think, fine-tuning some general plan things, and the ordinance is very close. The board meeting on Tuesday, I'm going to try to get some direction on what they want to do with the tribes. I've had a conversation with Ellie about what the Yurok tribe wants. I've been unsuccessful getting the Tallawah, I guess, administration to respond. I think it's going to have to be outreach from the board. That's kind of the last piece this ordinance really needs, is the treatment of the tribal lands and cultural areas. So, you know, I'm going to address the board on that. So if Jesse, you want to say something too, or if you want me to just do the update, I can. I'm happy to. I think.
So just last week when you weren't here, we just were kind of waiting for you to give us a summarized report when you thought you could, that would then go to the board. So.
Yeah. So here's the timeline that I'm hoping to achieve. The board wants the ordinance approved at the only December meeting, which means I want to get introduced at the only November meeting, I think, because of Thanksgiving, which means it needs to get to the Planning Commission for November, which means probably a special session of the Environmental Review Committee this month, which means at the next working group meeting that hopefully is next week, have a finished ordinance for you guys. That's my hope.
Joel, when did you say it was going to the Planning Commission?
November.
November, because next Thursday our ERC meets.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Yeah, I talked to Taylor about it. I'm hoping to hit that, and if not, I'm hoping we can call a special meeting. One of the two.
So when do we get to hear it or see it?
As soon as I figure out what the board wants to do.
Okay.
So, you know, maybe Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, right after the board.
Yeah.
Hears it. Okay.
The board is either going to kind of, what the Yurok tribe wants is what Humboldt did, which is fairly easy to replicate. It's kind of already written. If the board wants to do that, we can. If the board doesn't, then they're going to have to kind of set a 2x2 meeting on their own, and this whole process might take another few months. So I got to really take their temperature on that issue. But, you know, the draft of the ordinance is basically done. Over the last week, Heidi and Taylor and I have been going through the general plan and determined that we need to restrict the cultivation to general ag and not prime ag to be consistent with the general plan. So that means A zones and not AE zones, which should still provide a good amount of land, but it won't interfere or threaten to displace soil-dependent agriculture, which, at least kind of in this iteration, the board wants all of this is going to be, you know, greenhouse or totally indoors. So, you know, if at a later time we're looking at, you know, actually growing outdoors in the soil, maybe that is something that would be different. But I think the version that you'll see from me is going to be manufacturing and A zones. I have a litigation issue I have to deal with at 11 that I didn't have any control over the scheduling. So, you know, if there's things that happened, Athena Health is calling. Is that for anybody?
What did you say?
Board Chambers.
Was it the last meeting that you left early, or was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you guys want to fill me in on what happened.
Yeah, there's some details that we should kind of wrap up, and then I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on regarding sizing in the ag zones. So we kind of broke it down a little bit more specifically, I think, after you left.
Okay.
So we were talking about starting with the 5-acre parcels, and then we were talking about starting at 500 square feet. And then I can't remember where we left off. Kurt was talking about, well, why not go a little larger on those parcels? We were stopping at 2,500 square feet with the 20-acre parcels so as to sort of encourage it into the M zone and protect the ag zones a little more.
So that 2,500 is kind of the outdoor, right?
No, we're talking about indoor still, because we were talking about 500 to 5,000 square feet for indoor.
So then you're talking about definitely stacking of 500 square foot.
Correct.
Okay.
And so I think it was a compromise between, I kind of didn't like the idea of 5,000 square foot indoors. We're trying to protect the character, the traditional character of the ag land. It's a little bigger business. So it seems like we fell into a compromise position in the middle of 2,500 as the cap on ag land. And then so for people who want to go larger than that, they're not encouraged to buy a piece of ag land, use it exclusively for cannabis indoor cultivation, not use the rest of the land. So if you wanted to go up to our county maximum of 5,000, then you got to get into the M zone. I think that was the idea. But what I wasn't sure about, what I don't have clear on my notes, is if we were going to stop at 500 square feet with the 5 acres. I remember Blake saying he didn't see a lot of difference in a lot of neighborhoods between a 5 and a 10-acre parcel. So we weren't going to do like a ramping tier. It was just, but then Kurt was saying, well, what's the difference with an indoor operation of 5 acres? Why not have 1,000 or 1,500 or whatever? And that's where I can't remember the detail of where we left off with.
Well, I know we talked, like, the whole point being that if you put a cap like 5, like if you have a tier that can go up to 2,500, but you can only do that on larger parcels, well, then you're driving all of it into the larger parcels, which is kind of partly what we're trying to stay away from. We're trying to, broaden it throughout all these parcels, but no one will want to start business basically on a 5-acre parcel because they can't expand. So, I think the idea was that through setbacks that maybe it's
right.
it's okay on any of those parcels as long as it meets the setbacks and the other requirements.
And I think Heidi's input on that note was that another backstop to that is the use permit process to prevent a larger operation from setting up on a 5-acre parcel that's just not suitable for whatever reason.
And I think that's where the 2,500 maximum kind of came from, was the idea, well, let's broaden it to the 5 or the 10 or the 20, whatever acre, but let's make it only 2,500 total in ag in general.
Okay.
And then meet all the setbacks.
We had a 200-foot from residential zone setback. I think that's consistent across the size of the parcels.
How does limiting it to, cutting the growth in half encourage anybody to use the rest of their property?
Well, it doesn't. I think I can't remember who said it, but it was kind of a good idea that if somebody is inclined to go to the maximum to 5,000, then you're just not in ag land anymore. Like that was the idea. I don't know if it makes sense or not, but it was the idea if somebody just wants to, you know, go as big as possible, then encourage it into a different zone than ag. But I don't know if that is reasonable logic or not.
So I think what I'm hearing is that we don't even have the 500 tier here. It's just up to 2,500 on acres, 5 acres or more, and, you know, as deemed appropriate in the use permit process.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, but you still have the 500 square foot.
Yeah, you could do that, but there's nowhere that it's limited to 500. Right.
Right. I mean, if, you know.
Sure.
So
I don't know if that's-
the outdoor permits that would still be in a greenhouse, we had a much larger setback, didn't we? Wasn't it like 1,000-foot setback from a residential zone because we're not.
For outdoor style.
Yeah, for
correct.
outdoor, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Outdoor in a greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, the smallest license you get from the state is 2,500.
Right.
That, are we still talking about 20 acres or larger? Or are you thinking we're gonna
Outdoor?
do
I don't think we're
that?
talking about outdoor at all.
We haven't got to that yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but because of the board, I think we just decided to take outdoor, open air, or whatever, unmitigated cultivation completely off the table.
Off the table.
For ag zone.
Yeah, that's what we had discussed at the last meeting, was
Yeah.
just basically because, just due to the you know, the feedback we got from the board, I think we all kind of came to that general consensus that outdoor, open air just wasn't going to happen.
Okay.
So
In ag.
not the place to start, at least.
Yeah, at
you know.
least, yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll pick that conversation up when we get to timberland. But for now, just to go ahead, just to keep it focused, you know, for the board and to be attentive to their input at the last meeting. I figured we just focus it on the indoor, the ag, the manufacturing. It's just easier to start with that.
I agree, with the, you know, keeping it in an enclosure. You know, that's what the board wants to see in a greenhouse. I'm not sure that we need to, you know, my position, you know, is 5,000 square feet is the state small tier. You know, and I could see, you know, we're not maybe never going to get there, but I did some investigation into Loud Pack, you know, and of course they set up there, and it's not small. You know, it's a town of about 18,000 people in Greenfield, California. And as of April, Loud Pack had become the largest employer with 278 employees. They operate at 900 Cherry Avenue in Greenfield. The mayor, the majority of the employees are Greenfield residents, you know, which to me is just a shame if we're just not thinking about.
What county is that?
This is Monterey. And, you know, it's made numerous construction jobs, and there's, let's see, it's about 15 miles to the coast, so there's some differences there. And the differences is that they had a supportive mayor, supportive leadership among the leadership, supportive city council, that one of the economic opportunities, despite the fact that Greenfield has 60% larger median household income. You know, so I think the difference is we don't have an option in this county, you know, to not think about a wage earner and how we're going to create a wage earner, and how we're going to, you know, what facility is going to make 100 employees here. I'd like to think about that. You know, I said that last time. I said I'd like to present something that nurtures the small local people, that nurtures them, that gets them into this business at a small scale that they can afford to get into, and also a scale that nurtures our workforce back, that provides a supplement to the crabbing industry. When the crabbing industry goes down for a year and loses only $10 million, and we cry and benefit, you know, throw benefits for that, $10 million is just puny. You know, $10 million is a few of these small farms, but I'd like to see a bigger farm, you know, so yeah, we got 60% higher income, and I looked at Indeed, you know, and I compared Indeed this morning, Crescent City and Greenfield, and there's not much difference. There's Starbucks on both, there's Dollar Tree is available on both. The difference is that Loud Pack's been on nonstop since spring with constant opportunities. I thought about moving to Greenfield. I said, you got experience in the cannabis industry, pretty much we'll find a place for you if you think you have talent, you know? And they do everything. They extract mostly CO2. They have a pretty famous line of cartridges really at this point. And now they're farming their own products. They're doing pre-rolls.
Hey, Robert, how large is their blueprint? I mean, in terms of the facilities they're
I looked at some photos,
operating.
and I haven't found one piece of information that's telling me how big they are. But I can tell you from the photos, they're big.
Mm-hmm.
They're big, beautiful greenhouses. We could look at their website if one of you's got a laptop up. It's loud.
I have it up, and actually, I think when you mentioned it last weekend, I had brought it up, or looked at the deal. They looked like they're fairly large, and I think it actually said somewhere,
So they cultivate also.
but it's also medical only.
It's medical only, and look at what they're doing with just that.
Yeah, let's
you
see
know?
here. These are,
I
this
mean,
is
my
just a
goodness, I mean,
schematic.
to me, that makes
Oh.
the whole other point of, my gosh, that's medical only. I didn't realize
Looks like
that.
it's 137,000
Yeah, one is
square feet.
137, it's all up here, two of them are on the same road. One is 137,000 and another's 223.
I think the point there would be that that's I mean, such a small blueprint on their agricultural footprint,
Yeah.
such a micro blueprint to their agricultural footprint, and yet they're the largest employer in their community now, not the massive, you know, agricultural farms that are producing massive scale whatever they're producing around there, and there's a lot of agricultural land. It's this tiny little piece of the agricultural footprint that's produced their largest employer in Greenfield, California. We have to consider that opportunity, the chance that might happen in some capacity, be it on manufacturing land, be it on ag, the little bit of ag land east of the highway, where, you know, out of the coastal zones, you know, be it wherever it is, you know, whether it's on Mr. Westbrook's land, whether it's on Mr. Alexander's land, wherever it ends up being, whoever prospers from it, whoever loses their money on it, let's see some jobs get created on it, you know? You know, and it says the difference is that we're being arbitrary. The difference is that they pursued a goal of economic development, and we're cutting things in half arbitrarily. We're an advisory committee. We serve the county at the bequest and the will of the Board of Supervisors, and we should stop playing so much hot and cold with them. They put us on as an advisory committee, you know, so we should give them an option of what they'll accept, but we should give them an option of what we advise them as well, what would be good for the county. And, you know, again, nurture small, compete for big. You know, that's where I'm at, you know, and I understand we're not going to get there, but I don't want to stop. I don't see a reason to cut 5,000 in half at this point. You know, let's make a start that hopefully becomes a start. You know.
I hear you. I'd be supportive of that if we're talking about outdoor.
But these are
I hear what you're saying.
greenhouses,
Jobs are
you know?
jobs. No, I get you. Yeah, sure.
And there's space for them, you know, not in the coastal zone.
Right. For the purposes of this 5,000 square feet, we are talking about inside, but yeah, economic development, I mean, that's what we need. You know, what is the goal here? I mean, we haven't been clear exactly with what our goal is. We sort of have, you know, we could present 3 different ordinances with 3 different goals, right? There's like ordinance A is super conservative with the goal of not upsetting anybody and being really small, you know, and then, you know, on the other end of it is the goal of just as much economic development as the county can support, as the climate can support, as the infrastructure or whatever. And then there's something in the middle that kind of captures what's politically viable while at the same time, you know, making it large enough to even be worth doing in the first place. So yeah, duly noted. We've been all over the place in terms of which direction we're trying to go. So maybe at some point we just present more than one option Because part of the problem, you know, if we're presenting something to the board and they're just voting yes or no, and they aren't going to be really involved in the process of adjusting things or coming up with ideas or replacement ideas or whatever, then they need to have a couple of options to pick from, I suppose. I don't know. I need to get some feedback from staff to find out what makes sense in that direction.
I think the board is expecting the group to have a recommendation, not a bunch of choices. I think, you know, at the very beginning of this, I gave them the 3 options, big, little, and in the middle. And they create a working group instead of directing. So, you know, I think they're counting on people who have spent more time and are more involved in it to tell the board what's the recommendation.
I think, you know, from my perspective, when we talk about, you know, economic development for, you know, the community, providing jobs for people at decent pay scale, you know, I don't necessarily envision, personally, a large operator singularly, you know, providing 200 jobs in this county, because I think that's contrary to where I believe that we can provide 200 jobs. I think maybe if we had, you know, 2 or 3 different operators providing, you know, I agree with you, Robert. I mean, I think we've had a lot of personal discussions on this too, and I do agree that, you know, I think the economic development is where I came from too, providing jobs for people, providing jobs for myself. It's hard to imagine us allowing, I mean, Loudpack, I agree, I mean, they look like a beautiful company. They're looking at the pictures with Heidi here, their facilities are pretty beautiful. Desert kind of area, a lot of palm trees. They've got 800,000 square feet of cultivation space in their greenhouses. That's a lot. I couldn't imagine that from a single operator in this county. I think it would be a detriment to small scale. But I think there might be a middle ground where we can try to, you know, I mean, if we're talking about manufacturing jobs being something that, you know, basically, I don't see the large-scale vertical integration being something that's a benefit to our county. I think if a vertical integration were to happen where we had operators doing cultivation from seed to sale, either it be retail all the way to manufacturing, I think we could do that on a smaller scale, not allowing large-scale operators to do that, but multiple, you know, Sonoma County winery style, where we had Napa that was producing large amounts of wine prior to Sonoma County really, you know, coming up. And Sonoma County did it the opposite way. They went in their winery industry and they went with small-scale wineries, you know, capped certain things at the beginning of their growth so that they encouraged the small-scale wine farmer. And they've done a great job. They have now, you know, they've taken over the you know, the first-class, world-class wine. I could see that for our county, but I can't see allowing large-scale operations to accumulate jobs. I'd prefer to see it on a personal level, multiple operators, you know, hiring 10 to 15 people. I don't know how we get there with the land that we've got and the different opinions we have in this county, but, you know, that's kind of where I feel. But I definitely think that this is the part of our job is to think about how we get jobs going too.
So Robert.
Well, I mean,
Oh, give me a
just
second here.
Okay.
Robert, I would ask why you bring this forward now. We've been meeting for a long while, and is this something you just learned about, or are you just thinking that now is the right time?
Well, I'm really just trying to be consensus orientated and enforce. I think we had a 5,000 square foot and not cut it in half arbitrarily, and we'll have a starting point there. I'm not talking about, you know, let's make it Loudpack. And to Eric's point, I think there's a misunderstanding with the small cultivator between the retailer. We're Little Caesars. You're going to be small and you're going to do well in San Francisco. You know, but the people here use Little Caesars, you know, and I'm going to order the products that they can afford, and it's going to come from a large producer like Loudpack. You know, I'm going to carry the local products. They won't be the same volume, you know, and up till now, it's all been a lot of local products, you know, but in the licensed marketplace, there's going to be you don't compete, the state has its policy. Because Loud Pack exists, you're not going to, you're not going to lose out because we have Loud Pack here. You know, it's not going to, we now have to compete as a county. We can't just compete as a small producer. We have to compete as a county for economic growth.
Can you explain what Loud Pack is?
Loud Pack's just a brand. I think it sold recently. I think a rapper started it, maybe named Loud Pack. I'm not up on hip scenes, but they were just a cartridge and an extract for a long time. And then right up on when it got legalized, they really got their stuff in gear, and they made beautiful packaging and got in compliance with California's standards, and made really actually real decent products for the price for the way the market is right now in California.
Okay.
Very competitive, and they do that by being a little bit larger. So I just don't see where a 5-acre farmer's not going to compete with a 50-acre farmer here, because your products are going to be exported. You know, I mean,
yeah, you've answered my question. That's good. Unless you have a new point.
No, but that's just my point is that we're not going to suffer from having a large employer. It's not going to make a small producer suffer. That's why I say we should have a policy. And I'm not saying that we need to create this policy right now. It's not on the agenda. We have an ordinance that Joel's ready to go forward with, and I think it'd be great if we just get it. But I don't want to arbitrarily cut it in half. And I'd like to move forward from here in the future agendas to come up with an ordinance that, and also further enhance the nurturing aspects of what we do as a county to nurture small business in any aspect, but we're on a cannabis board, so for small cannabis, but also incentivize this industry providing for the basic population, which is a median income of, I think, about $24,000. You know, there's a very poor population, and to provide an extra opportunity in the employment section. Sure. It's not seasonal.
So would you be on board on a consensus? I mean, I know you just said that you're on board with the consensus. With restricting indoor cultivation in the ag zones to 2,500 square feet, so not basically trying not to arbitrarily cut 5,000 square foot in half. Because I mean, I think Joel's already got the
from my understanding, a quick time out here.
Totally,
I want to hear from Kurt, then I'm going to talk, and then we'll go to you. All right,
absolutely.
Let's weigh in here because we're really going sideways here.
Well, I don't think we're going sideways at all. I think we're trying to come to a consensus from what we're saying. And Robert, I think you're making the exact point you've made every meeting so far with what you're saying. So it's just adding to your point that we are, as a county, are missing out on this employment opportunity. And you're just giving some new details, but it's your same point, and I hear it, and I agree with it. I think, unfortunately, we're kind of hornshoed into what the Board of Supervisors is wanting from us, and so we're trying to push forward with an ordinance that's a little bit, encompassed by that. We've got some real differences of opinions from Blake's side to maybe your side, and everybody in between, or I don't know which person is the most far out on all those positions, but I think we're definitely probably going to miss the boat on some of the employment opportunities that you've been pushing on because of how we're focused into this. I know what Loud Pack is, and I hear what you're saying about that, and probably, and unfortunately, in my opinion, that will never happen here based upon the choices that we make today, because we will be years behind other counties in starting something like that, and so a business like that will probably never pop up here down the road, probably, When you start out allowing it like Monterey County has, boom, you get a business like that. That business possibly will thrive there for a long time and provide a lot of employment and help that community greatly. We as a poor northern community will probably be stuck without something like that. Hopefully we can get some economic benefit from the choices that we make here today and in the near future. So yeah, we should try to come to a consensus and move forward with this indoor things. I think the 2,500 is okay. I don't like it, but it was kind of a give and take thing.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, Robert, the only part, I really was curious to know what was different, and I understand where you've been, all year, what side you're coming from. But I was literally, I meant my question because just at face value, I was curious. What was new, what was different? And your point, your answer was, well, you say we're arbitrarily cutting something in half. I would now like to address that, and from my point of view, no, we're going from 0 to 500 or to 2,500. And so that's what I believe fits into our county. A couple of you guys has mentioned consensus today, and I don't know if consensus is really the topic or the term. It's really compromise, and we're somewhere, like everyone says, somewhere on two extremes, and we got to find something somewhere in the middle that will be palatable to the Board of Supervisors and to our community. And so that's, I'm just calling that out as chair. Now, my personal opinion, back to where we're at, I just would really caution everyone to think that this is a real panacea for income. We need to be careful on that, because the markets are changing. The reality of what worked yesterday or a year ago or 2 years ago is probably going to be a lot different than what we end up with in 2 years down the line. And as medical research comes in, we'll learn more, good or bad, or that either makes it more or less valuable. And so again, I just know from my point of view of being a resident of this county now for 28 years that yes, we had the lowest per capita income of any county in the county or in the state when I moved up here. It was mean income back then was $11,000. The next one on the list was $13,000, and so we've doubled since then. And I think we've passed a few counties since then. That's my general understanding. I could be wrong, but we've got to build something that is I guess, solid and sustainable. And by sustainable, it means profitable. And if we throw around too many large ideas at this juncture, at this point in time, I think we would then encourage some business possibly to get too big at an inappropriate time, to where it won't set up for success. It would set up for failure. So I guess from my personal standpoint, I hear what you're saying about the Monterey example, and that's a good one, I think. I don't know, but different set of people, different set of circumstances. But I'm not opposed to us building towards that. I guess I'm just saying at this point in time, we're going from 0 to something, and we're trying to build a niche, in my opinion, a real specialty market that's hopefully more higher, perceived as a higher dollar deal or a premium product. And I really don't know if that can happen. I don't know anything about that product, but I'd like to set up an infrastructure that allows for that.
And then up to 5,000 square feet, I believe is what we were on. Am I mistaken there?
Yeah, I think, that's kind of where everybody was, but that was, in time.
And that's by state definition, the small scale.
No, it can't be true, because I was at 0.
That's what I'm saying.
So let's not pretend that that's true.
So 5,000 is what everybody kind of agreed on in the time that Blake was gone.
At one point, I would looked at you, Blake, and we were talking about TPZ land, and I said, how about 20,000 on 10, or 20,000 on 20? I guess there's no 10-acre TPZ anyways. 10,000 on 10, and you said, and you came back with 10,000 on 20. So I mean, so I really feel we're just arbitrarily cutting it down. And I just ask you, what economic theory, being that these people are going to compete with the rest of the people in the state, these people are going to compete with Loud Pack, what economic theory, would tell us that we're going to be more profitable by being less competitive in our county,
Yeah, That's a pretty broad question, hard to, pinpoint down. I think my comments already addressed that. I don't know enough to argue this at this point. I guess all I'm telling you is my personal opinion, to date. And
I'm going to go in a minute, but I want to leave you guys with a thought that I haven't mentioned before. Sure. When we started this working group, I did a legal opinion on whether it was a conflict of interest for people to be on it who would then apply for permits. The answer is, if this advisory body's recommendation is adopted by the Board of Supervisors consistently over time without significant change, you develop the kind of public officer status that would bar you from having a financial interest in the product that you create. So the 6 plants, the tax, we'll see about the manufacturing retail ordinance. If the board approves the cultivation recommendation, you're looking at a pretty good track record over a year of having your recommendations approved without change. So, and especially if Robert's going to apply for a permit, I think Robert needs to exit the group. But the group itself might need to be reevaluated in its role and how specific its advice is and what it's doing. And I'm not saying what the work group needs to turn into, but I had kind of come up with that opinion and thought, all right, well, we'll see where this goes. And, I think we're going to see 2 ordinances before the board in short order, and we'll see how, to what extent the Board of Supervisors is adopting these recommendations without change. And that's a conversation to have. So as I leave you guys in a minute, I think, if this cultivation ordinance is the last full-scale ordinance that this group, as currently constituted, recommends, what do you want it to be?
I need a little clarification there on that. You wrote that opinion prior to the group?
I wrote that opinion probably in December, probably right when the group was created.
Okay, why wasn't that ever mentioned to us? That we might be in conflict of being able to pull a permit?
No, you won't be in conflict. You won't be not allowed to pull a permit.
Okay.
But you might be not allowed to stay on the working group.
Why wasn't that mentioned to us prior?
There's a lot.
I think it was.
There's a lot
about it.
I don't remember that. I've been to pretty much every working group. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just wondering because, it seems as though we've gotten stuck on the one place where I had mentioned 6 meetings ago that we should not start, which is the ag zone. And, that in and of itself has taken up 3 months of our time. And now I hear from staff that right when we get to the point of talking about where most of us have come from, the area for outdoor cultivation, where I think it actually fits the county's profile the most, where I think most of the people have agreed in this county that that's the place, we may be asked to leave the group. That to me doesn't ring well. I don't know how we got to this point that now all of a sudden, you've got a working indoor cultivation and now we've been faced with the fact that we might be asked to leave the group. I don't know, it just doesn't, I'm just a little shocked here.
Let me jump in here a little bit. That was definitely one of the first questions I ever asked, and I asked, it wasn't a private meeting, I think, maybe when I asked specifically, but I talked about it at board reports also, that specific point of the conflict of interest, and at what point do we remain involved? And
we never got an answer as to that.
Well,
that was never something that was, well, why wasn't it ever mentioned here publicly with us? Because none of us, I don't know if, I'm pretty sure Robert's pretty shocked because I wasn't aware of that.
I think I've divulged any opinion I've had when I've had a conflict of interest, so I've not pursued caps, I would have loved to.
Yeah.
But,
it's definitely the first time I've heard of it.
That's fine with me. I'd like to see the board evolve, actually.
My bad dream's coming true.
I'd like to see it evolve in the same direction it is, actually, where we have, the types of characters we have here. But honestly, I would be okay with seeing the board evolve.
I have a question for, sorry, I didn't interrupt. Before Joel goes,
I've got a question also for Joel, maybe before, and then,
go ahead.
And it's really, Joel, do you, in the future, in your crystal ball, do you think that what we do here now in this time period is going to be final, or is there going to be the option where, this type of cannabis working group reconvenes and, adjusts policy?
I think either could happen. I think what this board can create, and I think that it really doesn't matter if it's indoor or outdoor, what this board can create, and I hope it does create, is the structure. The structure is going to be amended, expanded, contracted, changed, but the application process, the use permit, the concept, after that, you know, if it's a working group of just kind of industry voices that say, hey, it's not working for us, you know, then that might be what it is. You know, it might not be, you know, let's review drafts of ordinances and talk about code language. I'm not sure. I can say, though, that, you know, as far as not sharing that opinion with the board, there's lots of legal advice that I give my client, the county, that I don't give you guys. And I'm sorry if this one seems kind of shitty that it comes out now, but, you know.
Just a wee bit.
You know, I wrote this opinion.
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, this is something I've carried as a question and without a super clear answer and accepting that there isn't a super clear answer right from the beginning. I mean, it's that, I don't know, it doesn't surprise me at all.
The standard of what it means to have your opinions adopted consistently over time without change is a pretty vague standard. And I didn't know at what point we'd trigger that. And I'm not even 100% saying we've done it now. I'm giving you guys a heads up because my client, the Board of Supervisors, is probably going to be told about it soon, and they're going to decide if they think you're running into that conflict territory.
And I guess my personal opinion was that I wish we would have started with outdoor cultivation, everybody. Because truly, we've just wasted a lot of time on indoor stuff that I don't believe personally is going to be a large benefit to this county.
I think it's the same kind of framework.
I think if you started with outdoor cultivation, we're going to be talking, we would have been still talking about that months from now.
I think
still,
I think if you're, you know, the goal of getting it done by December necessitated an indoor conversation.
So, you know, I hear what Joel's saying. I talked about this with a different lawyer than Joel in the very beginning before I ever sat on this board. I think his legal opinion is coming from, in my unlegal opinion, a very gray area, right? We're picking out, this is a very gray area that there's no specific answer at the end, but it could lead to this. Now, the people I talked to said, absolutely, that's not going to lead to that. If I was sitting here in this spot right here and I was, quote unquote, dictating to Joel, these are the things you need to write in your ordinance. Now write this ordinance, and he agrees and he writes it and takes it to the Board of Supervisors, then yes, me sitting here under this microphone is going to have a very hard time getting a permit because I just wrote the law, they accepted it, and now I'm using the law, right? There is not a single person on this board right here that 100% agrees with everything that we've created. We have sat here and said, okay, walk with that then, that's fine, as a consensus to some definition. But I do not agree with any of these ordinances that are going before the Board of Supervisors. I wash my hands of it essentially and say, okay, try to accept that, please. Please accept something, right? But Blake doesn't sit here and say, I want any of those things to be accepted necessarily. He's sitting here saying, okay, this is palatable for me if it has to go forward.
I got to get going, but let me just say that none of that is legally significant, what you just said.
Let me ask you a quick question before you go. So do you see it as realistic for you to work with the board to create the changes and the details necessary to create the separation from the details that we give between the details that are actually in the ordinance? Do you have that kind of?
I think that's the conversation we need to have with the board.
All right,
because if the board is saying we want the working group to tell us, give us a fully formed ordinance that we can choose to adopt or not, then we probably need to pick an end date and say, as soon as that ordinance is in place and permits are being issued, right, we start to have conflict issues.
Got it.
But those, you know, those are conversations that the board might want your input on. I don't know. And I'm not sure I'm going to bring it up on Tuesday. I probably won't. It'll probably start with confidential memo that they see only. It's just the nature of this thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, you know, just something to chew on. If you guys can give me kind of what you are settling on, and somebody email me so I can go in the ordinance. you know, we're right up against it, like really right up against it.
Yeah, it's just going to be a bare bones. The cultivation sector that's going to actually be meaningful for us here, I think, is going to take a long time to sort out. So.
And by the way, you know, I did a cannabis presentation for the Planning Commission last night. I don't think it went well. You know, I don't think that there's 3 votes for anything that this work group does on the Planning Commission. So just be ready for that November meeting, you know, and come if you want to weigh in on that. But I got to get on.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel. Thank you.
I'd like to comment a little bit about Monterey and
Sure.
competition and scale and business and everything, just from what I heard. I have family in Monterey, so maybe we should move to Monterey, Robert. It's a nice place. Yeah, I do.
Better weather.
My mom lives there. And they're set up for ag, you know. There's ag distribution places where you can buy, you know, stuff at the right price. You know, it's definitely the place for business. Even Humboldt's probably better for business, really, you know. If I was really just wanted to focus on business, I'd probably sell all my holdings here in Del Norte, and I would focus on Humboldt, keep my head down, apply for a permit quietly, and just be in business. But that's not why I'm here. That's not why a lot of people are here. I think a lot of people would like to change the character of where they're forced to be. If you don't want to live here and you're stuck in a bad situation, then you really want to change things for yourself and for other people who are in a similar situation. But our job isn't to change the character of the county. I don't think that can happen naturally and, you know, organically. But I don't want to be responsible for that. And the board's definitely not going to be responsible for that. So a bigger scale, economically focused ordinance, I think, would have to be done with a voter initiative. That would, I think, the only way to get that done in a short period of time, to kind of force it through despite the opposition. And I think that's totally possible. I think it would probably be pretty easy to do with a little bit of money and some committed people. We could probably write the ordinance any way we want and get it passed. But then you can have a counter ordinance that comes through to fight it also. And that happens in counties where there's division and it's just treated as a battle and winner takes all. And then it goes back and forth in a fight. And nobody makes any money in the end, I think. The lawyers, yeah, right. Yeah. Lawyers make a lot of money.
That's always true. So I guess I want to ask you guys, what do you want to do with this situation today?
Right.
You know, we need to leave well, we have an hour, but we need to leave some fine-tuned details.
Right. So just to finish up here, the annual license process still isn't underway yet. Nobody has an annual license from the state. Nobody is dealing with the track and trace system. Nobody is operating inside the parameters of what the business is going to look like next year or in 2 years. So nobody's, you know, these big business models really aren't functioning under the restrictions that they're going to have to function under. It's still really a free-for-all in a lot of ways. Like, you're supposed to keep track of everything on a piece of paper in case somebody wants to look at it. Like, that's how it works right now. There's really no accountability. And so things are operating much like the old way, you know, but without having to worry about getting busted. And so when the annual license system comes on and the track and trace system is online, who knows how long that'll take for everything to work. You know, what works and what doesn't is going to change. What it costs to make business work is going to change. The number of people it takes to run an operation is going to change. You know, an operation of X amount might take 5 people today, you know, in the black market scene, you know, but that might take double or triple that under a regulated market in order to meet all of the compliance that it takes. These farms are hiring, you know, 1 person per location just for compliance and track and trace entry in a system that doesn't even exist yet. You know, so It's really going to change, and so I am all for going, you know, big enough to support solid employers in the county. But because the model of things is going to change, we're already past the point of getting in the beginning, like a company like Loudpack or counties that really embraced it with big money right in the beginning to attract maybe some anchor employers that are going to stay in the community. And I think we kind of already missed that window. And so now I think we're probably better off with the way we're going. Start with a smaller scale experiment, and then when the state and the industry settles a little bit, then we can see how a bigger operation would fit, one that's lasting. So once once an industry is established, you know, in the state or wherever, then those businesses can set up where it makes sense, where it's economically viable to set up. And it will be clear where that is. If it's here, then great. If it turns out to not be viable here, then it won't help us much to have a big operation come in that then can't function here because of the reality of state regulation. So I like the track we're going with, starting a little smaller with the idea of being able to change quickly.
Yeah, so I agree with that, and I'm going to try to make Eric happy here for 1 second.
Do I have a big poof on my face?
Yeah, but I'm going to try to get us right back to where we could have been like just a few minutes into this meeting. So we kind of all started talking about indoor, like that was the thing we kind of got stuck on from the last meeting. We wanted to talk to Joel, he's left now, we never really finalized that, but was the whole sizing of indoor on ag, right? That was the one little thing we needed to discuss, and we all kind of rolled our eyes and said, okay, 25, because what we started with was 500 on a 5-acre parcel, but you could do up to 5,000 on a 20-acre parcel, and we kind of came to the conclusion, well, that drives everything to 20-acre parcels, and kind of, that kind of defeats the purpose, because everyone's going to run to larger parcels and not use them.
Right.
So we kind of boiled back to 2,500 on any size ag parcel of 5 acres or more, meeting the appropriate setbacks, and we all kind of cringed a little bit and kind of halfway heartedly agreed with that, and maybe we should just deal with that and be done with that, right? And so the next thing we talked about, which was only other thing left I thought to discuss before we got to TPZ or other outdoor zonings, was just the outdoor ag thing. We all came to the conclusion that it's got to be in a structure, you know, it's got to be in a greenhouse, you know, to mitigate those types of visual problems. We had a setback that was already figured out, and the smallest tier is 2,500, if I'm recalling everything correctly, as far as what the state issues a license at. So, you know, let's just say that at ag parcels, be done with it, and move on and talk about forest lands. And if during our conversations with forest lands we come up to a different sizing that we want to allow as far as like stacking those 2,500 acre permits, then we can retroactively come back and discuss then, okay, if we're okay with 10,000 in a forest land, then what should we be okay with in an ag land, right? So that's my 2 cents on how we move at this very moment from all we just talked to outdoor and forest.
I agree. Makes sense.
Yeah, that,
Way to
yeah.
focus, thanks.
So Robert, what got us off was your comments about Monterey. That's why I kind of asked, where's that coming from?
Forget Monterey. We're not 5,000 square feet. We're not talking about Monterey. Sure. I was making a point of, let's stop arbitrarily
Let's stop 2,500.
blanketing the people to make sure that we have poor people in our community. You know, I said it before, I've worked the jobs. You know, I've walked my then 2-year-old kid, you know, between the grocery store and the gas station at 2 in the morning to get the car, to go back home, to go get the old lady. I've done that, and it needs to be heard. That's the only thing I speak for here. I honestly have no expectations from the community as far as my own personal interest. And at 2,500 square feet, what we're making is an arbitrary and special interest orientated ordinance that will suit a few small people, and it does nothing for the people who will not show up here.
I don't think it's that arbitrary, because we're not stopping there.
But I'm okay. That's fine.
I get it.
I'm moving on. But we
it.
talked about 5,000 square feet. We talked
But we
about
still have
20,000.
that, we still have that on the table. It's
Well, that's
just-
where
it's
I'm
just
at
not an
then,
ag
and I'm
zone.
okay with moving on as a board with consensus with 5,000 square feet, and understanding that it does absolutely nothing for the community's economics, but I'm not okay with just arbitrarily cutting it in half again.
But we have 5,000 square feet in the M zone, and that's probably, you know, a realistic place to run businesses and run a 5,000 square foot operation and all the people that are.
You know, and these are greenhouses. You know, I believe we come up to everything's indoor.
Well, we are talking about indoor right now.
What's
Yeah.
that?
We are trying to focus on the indoor now.
Yeah, that's where the whole 2,500, I
only.
think that's basically, I mean, for all intensive purposes, we're gonna be talking about in a structured
Right.
building, not a greenhouse. I mean, it technically can happen in a greenhouse, but most likely, that's more of a
We don't have
outdoor.
Joel here, but from what I understood, he was, the state was gonna have their definition, and you'd apply to that license accordingly, but we would have our own
Sure.
definition.
Well, we can have greenhouses, but they're
That's
not going to be the
structure.
kind that are in Monterey. Well, we can't have like non.
Again, I'd say just drop Monterey. I brought Monterey up for the point that.
Okay, well, any community, what
you
I'm
know,
saying
what
is
we're
we're not going to have greenhouse production here without lights producing flowers on the coast, you know, just using the sun. I'm just saying it's not where the industry money is going to go, really, is what I'm trying to say. If on the coast we're talking about flower production, it's going to be pretty much using lights.
I'm not understanding the reason to cut it in half. We like the look of a greenhouse, we like the look of.
Well, we're not talking about it, we weren't talking about a greenhouse, we were talking about indoor.
We're talking about
which is completely-
warehouses.
Basically, a warehouse
lights.
or
Is
a.
there any, from my understanding, you know, we were just talking about a county definition of everything's in a structure. So you
Right.
could build a greenhouse, or you could
Well,
build.
not any greenhouse. It would have to be a greenhouse that all the air is filtered through a filter. So that already right there makes it like not economically viable to produce flower.
Yeah, and then it has to not allow
B,
light
it can't
emitting.
emit any light. C, you can't see the plants, like even like a little, like even if the plastic is translucent enough to identify what the plants are, that wouldn't fit Joel's
So
definition.
that's why
of
this
structure.
is
It's not just any
encompassing
structure.
the indoor ordinance that the county's writing
Correct.
right now. And so
Sure.
then we moved on to the outdoor ordinance, which is a different square footage, or maybe even the same square footage.
So if
depending
you
on
have
where
a
we kind of
structure that
finalize,
meets
but-
all these requirements of mitigation, but then you somehow find a way to not use more than 25 watts per square foot of light, then you can apply for a different license from the state, and that the county doesn't care about. But what we're talking about is, you know, really expensive, you know, kind of over-the-top structures that you're really probably not going to see as economic flower production on the coast here. And we kind of already wiped that out. If we're going to get into somebody experimenting with flower production on the coast, then we're going to have to be comfortable with relatively open air growing. It could be in a greenhouse, but you're going to smell it. You're going to see it sometimes. It's going to be traditional, like what they have in Monterey, like what's going on in
Yeah, hence
Southside.
the setback that we kind of came to.
So that's a totally different thing. What we're really talking about now is, you know, indoor warehouse growing, and then if somebody's creative enough to do it with the sun, then we're not going to block them from doing that. But realistically, really what we're trying to start with here is just, you know, burning lights in a warehouse.
And again, the state standard is 5,000 is what they call the small
Yeah,
scale.
but that's only because they don't have a large, because it stops at medium, there's no large, and so it's just a terminology
It just seems
thing.
like
The
we're
small
coming
is
up with,
500 The smallest one is 500 square feet.
A little bit of thought process here, and then we're coming up with a number that's small, and then just cutting it in half, kind of just 'cause, you know? That's, you know,
Well, one of the reasons we cut that number
wasn't cut.
is because we talked and we came up, okay, a 500 square foot on a 5 acre ag. And then we got, okay, but 5,000 on a 20 acre ag, and then it's, oh, wait a minute, that's driving everything to 20 acre ag. So why don't we just, instead of, how do we tier it up and all these different things, let's just say 2,500 and walk away from it and be done and move on to the next thing.
We are trying to keep it out of ag a little bit. I mean, that's a little bit of the consensus is we're not trying
That helps
to
it
push
too.
it
That helps push it a little bit away.
Trying to keep it out of ag a little
Yeah,
bit.
the point that seems to be forgotten here today, and maybe I missed it, but is that this isn't going to be the primary focus of the business of cannabis growing in Del Norte County. This is, how do we handle indoor structures on non-prime ag land? And Zone A is what he referred to today. So this is a much smaller piece of the big picture. And we're just trying to put parameters on this that work. And all those things are true that Kurt's brought up a couple of times today, that when we talked about last week's meeting, my concern as an ag guy who watches land just, grow and not get harvested, not get utilized, green grass turning to brown grass, then dying off and growing a new crop, but really not getting utilized. And so as a good steward of the land, I would like our policy here to somewhat encourage some common sense into that equation, and that's where we went from 500 square foot minimum or maximum on a 5 acre to, well, let's allow it to be stacked up to 2,500 feet. That's 5 licenses on one small parcel. That, to me, that was a big compromise from me, going from where we could have been really limiting it to way over here. And then you came in today with this comments differently, and I was asking why.
Well, I'd asked Joel earlier, I said, where are we at, Joel? With the ordinance that we've crafted, that Joel was prepared to show was a 5,000 square foot thing. So I'm not coming in with any big speed bumps at all. I'm saying I have consensus for the ordinance Joel is ready to present,
You're missing I think you're missing a key point of what you would have asked Joel, because if I'm not mistaken, I think he would probably tell us that he had the 5,000 on a 20-acre parcel, and that's where we're coming in with the difference here, because if we're at a 500 on a 5-acre and you can go up to 5,000 on a 20-acre, well, that's the point where we're making, is that essentially everything's on 20 acres, and it screws up the land, because people are going to go use a 20-acre parcel and not use it.
Yeah, we never had 5,000 on 5 acres.
So the ideological argument, I would just say, well, then of course,
essentially,
incentivize.
But let me just clear up here, because I'm the guy that's, the anti-guy, and what I'm saying, as of last week, I'm proposing 2,500 on 5 acres, not 500. So that's our starting point this morning as we opened up the meeting, and then I don't really care what Joel thinks, wants, or is going, right? He is here to take our recommendation, write it down legally, and present it to the board. So wherever his head was or wasn't is kind of insignificant to what I'm doing here. That's how I look at this. And so right now we need some concise numbers for Joel so that he doesn't get this reinterpreted differently. And where we are was 5 acres up to 2,500. Well, not 5 acres 2,500, 5 acres 500 with the ability to stack up to 5 times, which is a big difference than the way he stated it. So, you guys catching me on that?
And then 5 acre or larger, basically, is parcel.
Correct.
Can
Minimum of 5 acres.
Yeah, minimum of 5 acre parcel.
I would like
larger.
the 2,500 acre option. There's a scale for that. There's a scale for 500. I would like both options. On
There's not a license for 2,500 square feet. It's 500 and 5,000. And then it goes to.
How about we just take
10 or 20?
Public comment before we come to a consensus on all this?
Sure. So, well, we will shortly.
I think Heidi's got in front of her the copy of what Joel's kind of worked on a little bit, and maybe for a little clarification, we can see what actually Joel's literally got.
This is what, and I don't recall which version this is, so it may have changed, but at the time, it was indoor cultivation in agricultural districts, up to 500 square feet of indoor may be permitted on parcels 5 acre or larger, and up to 5,000 square feet on indoor cultivation may be permitted on parcels 20 acres or larger in size.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point that said we thought was not a good thing, because it drives everything to 20 acre parcels. And so, maybe you keep it like that, but anything 5 acres or larger can be stackable up to 2,500.
Yeah,
but it still kind of drives it to 20 acre parcels, which I don't really like necessarily. I like as long as the setbacks are met, it should.
I think it was a healthy compromise.
I think so too.
We went up on the 5, we went down on the 20, because none of us could agree.
Yeah.
And I think that
and it
that
doesn't
works out.
stop a 20 acre parcel from stacking
just to move
4 or 5 acre parcels.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't really stop that.
No, not at all.
So
Yeah, we had that exception of we talked about contiguous ownership parcels meeting your acreage qualification.
And again, we're talking about an indoor thing, so this is a building essentially.
Correct.
And on ag, it's essentially an existing building.
Most likely.
So, you know, as far as the coastal zones are going, and there's some ags that you're going to be able to build on outside of that. But again, it's buildings in existence, not many of them. Well, there's going to be some, but potentially, but most of them aren't really going to be much larger than that in general. You know, as far as what they can be used for.
I got some pretty.
It'll be down the line before the coastal commission maybe approves an ordinance that the county may say you can build in doing this, you know, with these permits.
Jesse, could you kind of possibly state our summary that will then go, you know, I guess through Heidi to Joel or however that works?
Yeah, I think I've got a good simple summary for the board report Tuesday. Will help keep it focused and make them feel good about not seeing plants and ag.
So right now, this is how I look at it. You're going to be stating it, whether you all agree or disagree. We will come to consensus right after it's stated, okay? So that let's not argue it while he's trying to get it on the table.
So, yeah, and I don't want to get into timberland details on Tuesday. So if we move past this, I'm kind of not inclined to get into too much past this for the board report, just to keep it simple. If they have other things they're thinking about at that meeting on Tuesday besides just cannabis. So yeah, it's I have 5 acre parcels is where we're starting as a minimum parcel size, and then that's right, ag, not AE, so not ag exclusive, but ag general. And then, and then it stops at 2,500 square feet for all the parcels. Sure, and so the way you do that from the state would be stacking multiple 500-foot licenses, but from the county it would just be a single permit. And then the use permit process helps the county to determine how many of these you can stack, between 1 and 5, depending on the suitability of the parcel, taking into account multiple factors, not just the size of the parcel, but its proximity to residential zones, its access, its yada yada. And that'll be, those kind of details will be more for staff and Joel and community development to work out. And so there won't be our specific recommendations specific to our businesses. And then M zones, all parcels in the M zone, up to 5,000 square feet. And so your license acquisition from the state is up to you, how you want to come up to 5,000 square feet, a single license, multiple licenses. It wouldn't matter to the county, I don't think. And I will talk to the board a little bit about the reasoning that we came to the sizing, why larger in the M zones, because we're trying to protect ag zones, ag communities, ag neighborhoods, traditional character of Delaware County's ag lands. And we think this is just, given the limited tools that we have to accomplish that, seems like the best way to do it. It's not a set of recommendations that any one of us would have given to the board, but it's something that in a 6-way arm wrestle, this is what we came to. So it's pretty simple. I think the reasoning about it's pretty simple, and I'll just talk a little bit about the nature of the structure, how it needs to be built, how it won't be defined by the state as indoor or outdoor, but it'll be defined by county council. How the building needs to be, the details of how it mitigates the nuisance effects of the plants, and it won't be limiting if somebody is able to build a structure that meets all these requirements, that doesn't use lights somehow. They can apply for an outdoor license to the state. It meets all the requirements of the county. And I think I'll be able to explain that in a way that makes sense to the board, so it doesn't sound like we're allowing outdoor, just because you're not using bright lights.
That's an indoor permit, right, we're talking about?
Yeah, but you might pull an outdoor permit from the state for your indoor Delaware County operation. And I'll find a really straightforward way to explain that. I'll have to think about it a little bit.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
Did we miss
okay.
any
It seems to me like you could very easily write in your ordinance that this is specifically to a state-pulled indoor license. These rules apply. And different rules are applied to a state-pulled other license, you know what I mean? But,
Well, it shouldn't, because if you're, let's say you build a building that meets the requirements that we're talking about, but your system doesn't require you to run that light threshold. You don't need more than 25 watts per square foot. Let's say you're running it at 15 watts per square foot.
Yeah, so then you pull a state
or less
outdoor
than
license, right?
Yeah, or a mixed
Or a mixed
light
use.
license.
Yeah, or mixed light license. And so my point being, then that rolls you into the county's system of,
Taxation, though.
well, how to mitigate the outdoor.
No, none of that matters. The only thing that it crosses lines with the county is with the taxation,
Yeah.
or it's how to tax you. But in terms of how you're operating, it doesn't make any difference. The rules for indoor and outdoor from the state and how you set up your operation doesn't really matter, so long as you're meeting the requirements that are set by the county for nuisance mitigation. And whether or not you're using lights at a certain intensity doesn't matter. And so the license designation you pull from the state won't necessarily be always indoor. It may be called outdoor, it may be called mixed light, but it will still have to meet the same performance standards of what we're calling indoor. So,
I guess that would what we would put into, when we get into outdoor cultivation talk. Because
Sure.
that's the type of license that I would be interested in pulling in.
And
my
maybe a
specific
picture is
space.
all-
Yeah, well, I guess
maybe
we
this-
already talked extensively about outdoor in ag, about it needs to be in a structure and there's
Yeah.
these large setbacks.
so,
That's where I'm coming from, trying to understand where that went to then.
well, just imagine, I think it's because you're mixing up like indoor and outdoor, I guess. Like it would be exactly the same as indoor, same thing. No setback, no additional setback required, because it performs exactly like an indoor. You're just not burning the watts. It's the only difference.
Sure, yeah, if you say you've got the ventilation and all these things, and the light, keeps the light from emitting during certain hours, all that kind of stuff, then yeah, then you're operating, even if you maybe have a state permit differently, you're operating under the guidelines of the county's indoor classifications. And so I guess my whole point was just that there's a different set of guidelines to operate under the county's outdoor operations. I
Right,
guess.
but we're not even gonna have that,
Not at this presentation.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we're trying to push forward an ordinance that's specific to a different thing, yeah.
So is there anything in that summary that Jesse just gave that we need to also include? Is there something that we?
I would say, like, we're saying we're protecting ag land, we're making this finding, basically. I think I think that's kind of your side of the equation. I think, even Kurt kind of backed me up on this, so I think we could also point out that part of the board felt that we were neglecting the wage earner and that we're running out of time as far as making an
So,
individual.
Robert, I got to call you out there. This is not about protecting ag land. I don't want you to put me in a box that just said I'm protecting ag land and not the wage earner. That has nothing to do with anything. This is not about protecting ag land.
Well, I'm not making it opposing.
No, this is not about any of that. This is about me driving down Moorhead Road and seeing large empty spaces and understanding that I don't want to be part of policy that encourages poor stewardship of land, whether it's ag land, open space, trees, forested, whatever. That has nothing to, that's where I'm coming from. So this is not about ag land specific. This is about utilizing a space, 5-acre piece or larger, and utilizing it most practically, or at least having some influence on trying to keep it efficiently utilized. But whether it's ag land or open land or I don't know, whatever the wetlands, I believe all lands need to be grazed. No, so, you know, I don't want this, and I also want economic development to some degree in our county, but it's got to be practical, and regardless of whether it's the cannabis industry or the restaurant industry or food industry or dairy industry, whatever, it's got to practically fit. We can't think that we're going to build large-scale businesses that employ 200 or 500 people or some number. A lot of those things just don't fit here no matter what they are. And so that's my comments in regards to kind of crawling before we run with this game plan.
I'm just saying, you know, I would say that the opposite way would be to encourage, you know, a larger scale so that you fill up your agricultural parcel with, you know, and of course, most of this is in the coastal zone. There's not much opportunity east of the highway. We're not talking about that. We've got a very small ordinance in front of us.
Yeah.
We'll have acres of cannabis.
I'm just saying, you know, that was
don't worry.
part of the discussion, I think, today was that, you know, that there are communities that have utilized this, we're probably behind the times. We're not going to move fast enough in this ordinance. Sure. You know, I think both me and Kurt, you know, said that, you know, this ordinance isn't going to provide jobs, you know, so I think, you know, we've got the protecting of the ag land in there. I would think like that point could be made that, you know, we feel this ordinance is probably a little bit small in scale to provide economic. And
I've reiterated that a couple times to the board and said, you know, that where we're starting, it needs to be clear. And I actually, that was a focus of one of my recent presentations was when we were talking about, do we ask for, you know, do we try to go bigger from the beginning, you know, or do we worry about asking for too much? And I brought that to the attention of the board and said, you know, it's the difficulty for the working group is, you know, trying to scale it correctly to what the board, you know, will accept, while acknowledging that what we're presenting is really not economically viable over the long term. And so if we're going to stick with what we're initially presenting, then there's not much point to even starting. And that it would go a long way to comfort the working group in not trying to push for more if we heard from the board that they understand that fact, that everyone's on the same page, that we're starting small, not to stay small necessarily, but as a learning point to be able to expand if it makes sense to everybody. And I think that was, you know, important to communicate so that, you know, you can start small without getting stuck in that box. And I think they heard that, and I think it's a good place to go. One detail I would like to talk about that we didn't get to with indoor operations is they're typically run at night, and then we didn't really talk about that. And we were talking about traffic and impacting the character of ag lands. And so it's important to remember that these operations will typically be run primarily at night. Most of your workforce is going to be, you run your lights at night generally to defeat the heat. And so if you're, you know, and then you don't have nighttime cold, then you're not heating during the nighttime. It's more efficient usually. Sometimes you can cheat out a little bit when you're in a place like the coast. Inland, you're always running lights at night. But that's a consideration we didn't really talk about. So your crew is going to be coming in at night for the most part. And so I think that's another reason why to limit the bigger operations, keep the bigger operations out of the ag zones. I know there's nighttime operations in ag land, but I don't think there's very many ag, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not very many ag operations that run, you know, mostly at night all the time, right? I don't know.
Silence of the Lambs, they butchered the lambs at night.
Right, yes.
Generally, you're correct.
Yeah,
know,
to
with
the most part, I mean,
cattle,
obviously dairies run 24 hours a day.
Sure.
But, you know, I've run crews at night.
Sure.
Depending on what the need
seasonal
was.
stuff that typically,
Mostly seasonal, yeah.
Most of the hours that get logged
Yeah.
during daylight hours.
I mean, but again, there are ag operations that run 24 hours a day. All these dairies run essentially 24 hours a day. Granted, they're nowhere near the volume of work during the daytime, you know.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah.
So that's one thing, you know, is indoors or.
Yeah, that's totally new to me. I did not.
Yeah, I
know
figured.
that.
I think of the, I forget what is not clear to people who aren't
Yeah.
in the business.
So we need to get back to, you know, a consensus agreement of some sort in terms of what Jesse highlighted and summarized for us. And I guess, Robert, would you be on board with that, or do you want us to keep?
Can we hear Mr. Westbrook in the
Sure.
public?
Okay.
You did not mention, and I don't know if it was taken off the table, that you could go to the 5,000 square on 20 acres. Is that totally off the table now, or is that another thing that's going to be mentioned in your?
Well, I think we were deciding to take that out of there in order to push the largest of the operations in the county, bring them out of the ag land and into commercial, into the M zone. That was the idea with that. We don't have to stick with that. We could, you know, make an exception and say only on parcels 20 and over, then can go bigger than 2,500. I mean, we talked about that in the beginning, but that was kind of the point of the compromise, was to bring that down and then leave our largest tier to the M zone.
Is there a possibility of, if you had 4 or 5 acre parcels, you know, clustered in a 20 acre zone, then you get there, you know, you get to 10,000. I guess, Bobby, what I hear you asking is, on a 20 acre single APN parcel, would there be an exception to go over 2,500 square feet?
Yeah, because we were talking while you were gone of going 20 acres, being able to have a 5,000 square foot building.
Right.
And so that was part of our discussion for going to stacking on 5 or a little bit more acres.
Yeah, and to what you were just saying, I mean, it does, you could have a situation where you have 4 5-acre parcels hosting a total of 10,000 square feet. Maybe they're under different operation, maybe they're under the same. Joel was talking about creating an ordinance in a way that limited ownership of multiple. I don't know how you even do that though.
Yeah, he was talking about some kind of limiting stacked.
Or you have to disclose, maybe that was the thing, you have to disclose your financial information, your connection to the other operations, so that the community can then have an opportunity to protest a single, you know.
Well, I know Joel we had gotten into the whole trying to finalize the outdoor conversations on ag, and that's where he had talked about contiguous ownership, how that would then, because we talked about property lines and things like that.
The same could apply
contiguous
for
ownership
indoor.
Removes the you know, property line designation.
Oh, right.
All that kind of stuff.
Sure. I just mean like if you were like around, if they're not contiguous, you know, just owning a bunch, they would just be disclosed so that you could find out. But yeah, so that's a little bit of an interesting dilemma. That was sort of the idea with stopping at 500 feet. And we also talked about something in the middle, like with a 5-acre parcel, limiting it to 2 licenses or more simply, 1 per 5 acres, you know, 1 500-foot operation per 5 acres.
Well, I don't, and it's from my perspective and my perspective only, right? Like, I don't like going, we had a kind of a 5,000 thing and we're kind of rolling it back a little bit. But what I am worried about, and this is kind of goes to the whole way of what we're proposing to the board, I am a little worried about if we wrote it 2,500 where we're at now, stackable on 5, right? And if we said, okay, but on 20 you can have a 5,000, I'm still worried about people going and grabbing 20-acre egg parcels and then not using them and driving the business to 20-acre egg parcels when there's so much more appropriate 5-acre egg parcels for this. And so if there's a limit, I think it should apply evenly to both those parcels, just in my opinion, just so it doesn't drive initially to one parcel or the other. Just my 2 cents on that. I would still be worried about that.
So
Well, that's like what Blake was saying. If you had 4 5-acre parcels right next to each other, and you put them all together in the same little corner, 4 corners, and you had a 10,000-acre building.
The use permit process could prevent that, though, if it was creating too much density in an area. We didn't talk about arbitrarily limiting density with a number. But the use permit process is a mechanism for limiting density.
We don't have the setback situation here like we're talking about with the other things, and so it just boils down to where there's a building or where there's property to build a building outside the coastal zone that meets these requirements. And when you can go bigger on a bigger parcel, then I don't like it driving everybody there. So I'm thinking of I'm thinking the 2,500 is a good way to just kind of walk away from it. And it doesn't drive people to one parcel or the other.
Right.
You find the appropriate building, and you can do what you can do up to a maximum amount period, whether it's on 5, 20, or 100, so. That's,
25 is your max.
I
yeah,
agree with
25
that
being the
logic.
max. And then that way we can expand it later. Maybe we see that down the road, the Board of Supervisors would see that putting it larger on a larger parcel isn't going to be a problem. I'm just a little bit worried about it becoming an initial problem.
Right, that makes sense.
I'm down for that for
It's a good middle ground.
expediency.
Yeah, we did a lot of that with the retail ordinance. We quickly gave up things for expediency. Now we're not.
So- You're okay with that, or you still want to?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. It's just that we had talked about a bigger scale on a bigger acreage. And so if we're going to go with the stacking on a 5 acre up to the 25, I would think that that's a smart thing to just cap
Right there.
at 25 to begin with right now. And that would not matter, like Kurt said, if it's a 5 acre, 10 acre, 20 acre, 100 acre, whatever, you're capped at 2,500.
Okay. So what if
And let me just say this, in my head, I like that logic, and it certainly makes sense to me. And if this was a 2-step process, and we're doing this year, and say in 2 years, we're all here again, looking for, phase 2, I would personally then be open to the idea of going larger on smaller acreages, right? If we know this works and we get to see it, touch it, feel it as these ignorant cannabis neighbors, of which I am, right? As we get more comfortable with understanding what we're saying yes or no to, then I guess what I'm saying is I can see myself coming back advocating for much larger numbers later. That's condensed and clustered, and it's just uncomfortable going there right now.
I'm in agreement with limiting it to 2,500 square foot on ag zone. I don't want to complicate the situation any more than it already is on property that is really not conducive to anything other than large scale indoor operations. But I appreciate that comment,
for the board
Blake, for
report?
sure. I mean, I look forward to hopefully we can meet back in 2 years and have positive things to look at from this, and we can think about the future then. But yeah, let's move forward with something on this indoor stuff and get out of the way.
So I'll just explain it as we're going to shoot for the same size permit allowance for all the parcels, so as not to drive it to larger parcels,
It's just a 5 acre minimum.
and then expand later. If it, when we see what it looks like and find out where it fits and where it doesn't fit or whatever, then expand it soon enough.
The only expansion is on your manufactured.
Yeah, you can go up to 5,000 square foot.
Right now, yeah, but later on, for ag land, if it's looking good and it's, there's a desire for people to want to go larger, it's not making a negative impact, then revisit it.
Any comments out, public? Setbacks in regards to this, do we?
Yeah,
have
we
any?
did. We have a 200-foot setback from residential zoned properties. And then we had a 50-foot setback for the building from property lines, which is an existing county code number for livestock buildings. And then I believe you can build buildings closer to the property line than that for other purposes. So we weren't including the absolute minimum building setback, but 50 feet.
And none of those setbacks apply on M zones?
No.
Correct,
Because
yeah,
it's just
just
an M
the-
zone is an M zone, you can do what you're going to do.
Just this existing county code for M zone, which
And
is strangely 0 setback. That should be changed.
So the setbacks would apply to A zones only?
Yeah, A zones only. So that, I haven't looked to see the spread, the breakdown of how much of our ag is AE versus ag general, how much we're eliminating. You know, the board talked about caps, the necessity for caps or not. Do you have any feeling for that off the top of your head, Heidi, about
I have no
ag
idea either.
exclusive and ag general?
I
We
don't
looked
know.
at the
Yeah,
maps,
without a
but-
map in front of me to see like what all the different ag zonings are, like,
Right.
you know. and
But I
don't-
just, you know, if we
I
look
know there
at,
are some things that are zoned ag manufacturing or something like that. And
I haven't seen that one.
what is
I
it,
mean-
what is it, Heidi? There's an ag industrial, or what is the heck is it?
There's an AI,
Yeah, ag industrial.
egg industrial.
Yeah.
Just generally all the different egg zone districts.
Well, we
like,
saw it before, but there's a whole bunch of different ones, right?
Yeah, we have AF, egg forestry, AI, egg industrial, AE, egg exclusive, and then A, which can be,
So those maps-
non-coastal A is 5 acre, and then coastal, you have an A5 and an A20.
So ag E is what we were talking about, not allowing this on.
Yeah.
That is
Am I not
correct.
soils.
So the maps that
And
we
then so
saw
all the other
for that-
ags that are 5 acres and larger than, other than like ag forestry at the moment, maybe?
Actually, I think that Joel just has the
General
A,
egg.
just the
Yeah.
general egg, not the AI and the AF.
Okay.
But the maps that we looked at, it shows,
Well, I was just wondering because like, in my mind, I'm thinking ag industrial, that's perfect for it.
There's not a lot of
versus-
that, though,
Versus
because-
I mean, it's
There's
similar as
2
manufacturers.
right.
There's 2 parcels.
Yeah, and I think we
So-
have one on each end.
I think the maps that, I have a question.
Sorry.
The maps that we looked at,
I was just wondering because I'm just thinking about what are all the ag parcels and
Right.
what are the
Yeah.
most appropriate ag parcels.
so we looked at some maps that showed the land use designations,
Right.
and I believe that those had different shadings for ag general, and
They
ag
did.
exclusive,
They did.
correct? So we should probably look at those again with this in mind.
Yep.
And see how much is being excluded by the ag exclusive that we're excluding.
That's correct, because
And
I
see
think what
what's
you would
left
want to
over.
do is if you're going to, especially in coastal, you would want to have the A5, the A20, and the
Right.
AI at a minimum. I don't know about
Yeah.
AF because it's actually consistent with timberland and there isn't
Right, right.
that much of it.
That's
so it
probably
might be
something to
kind of-
conversate about when we talk into
Timberland,
TPZ,
yes.
because
Yeah,
we're trying to,
yeah,
we're talking about moving
definitely.
things into ag.
But I would
forestry.
definitely think you would want to include the AI.
But can we get an adjusted map that shows those ag zonings that
same
we're
map
considering? Or should, because I want to look at those
Probably a
again.
pretty
can
large
see what
map,
we
but
can do.
that's the one thing
It's
I would
gonna
be
be
concerned
massive,
about.
yeah.
Let's
Last-
just look at what we
The
have.
last thing, I guess, I
again.
would be concerned about with the zoning, because, you know, and we just arbitrarily saying, oh, ag exclusive isn't something we wanted on, but I just wanted to see the map or know the properties, because if 90% of the properties are ag exclusive and 10% are ag,
Right.
whatever, then we're driving all this stuff into these certain little pieces of property.
Let's get
and
those
I-
maps for the
whoa,
next
whoa,
meeting
whoa,
back.
you know,
Okay,
we
now
had
our
last
zoning
time.
maps are 11 by 17 and we
Not
have
this.
a ton of them. If you
Just
want the
one that we
zoning
had-
maps,
The ones that we had before.
those
a
were
few
land
meetings.
use maps.
Yeah, those showed.
Which they're not perfect, but we can do those. I mean, we have them. I believe they're accessible on the
Yeah, if we could in the
computer.
last few
I'll go
minutes.
back there and
It
check.
seemed to me that there was a light green and a dark green, and you can see pretty
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
Or was that the 5 and 20? That was the light green was 5 and.
And just,
and it-
you know, just in my
didn't
mind, I
designate,
have,
did
I
it?
know the different buildings that aren't being used in different places, right? And so is by deeming ag exclusive, are all those properties on places that are ag exclusive? You know what I mean, all those buildings?
Okay.
I don't
No.
think so, but I don't really know.
All right, so that's the thing I'm gonna put in the report, is that Joel's finding that ag exclusive is not consistent with the general plan
Yeah,
for
that's
this
what I was gonna
project.
mention.
And so, we can't mess with that right now. We can't mess with the general plan. And so, that's just unmovable.
So it would
So
just be,
basi-
basically, it would be a question to Joel, does the AI interfere with the general plan? If we were to add AI as a
I don't think it,
zoning,
maybe, I'm not, there's only a couple of parcels for that. So the point I want to bring to the board is that we don't know, because we haven't seen the map to show the breakdown of ag exclusive.
The land use map.
We could allow it on ag
see
exclusive, we
the
just have to
colors of
determine
it.
it's an agricultural product,
In.
and that we would love the jobs, but
How do we zoom in? We zoom a little.
Can you zoom in here?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying, this doesn't.
working on it.
especially just on the description, so we'll know the three
Oh,
different
yeah,
colors.
it shows it, the dark
Yeah.
green is prime.
Yeah, the dark green is prime, and most of that is coastal. Christina, this doesn't appear to be working.
That's all at Moorhead Road.
I mean, I
it's
can't
everywhere.
find the,
It's all,
Yeah.
of it, so we're done. We can't
is it
do
on? That's a good question. No, it's not on, thank you. I didn't know. I
didn't know that.
So,
Just learned something
yeah,
today.
the whole project
Okay,
is
so let's
hosed.
zoom in. First, we'll look at the legend so we can get familiar with the colors. I think you guys just went. So the darkest green is egg prime, which would correspond with our AE, which we are,
Oh, interesting. Moorhead Road, there's a segment that splits it. Wow.
interesting, yeah. Okay.
That'd be really.
Then we
have
have
some upset neighbors.
egg gen, which is the kind of an olive green, and then the
Right.
more of a light green for egg gen 5.
So we would be in the two lighter colors of green.
And then
Which is
if you look here, where the thing is, that's our AI zoning, egg industrial.
There's no code for it over here on the right? or-
Why is
Yes,
that-
there is. It's called
there.
agriculture
Got it. I see
industrial.
it.
It actually
Yeah.
has the same name as the
Why
zone
would that be
designation.
AI? They're on Serena Road.
I don't know, there must have been some special people who knew people at some
Yeah,
point
they're-
that.
Good old boys.
That's how it all happened.
Yeah, Stevens Tennis Court.
I didn't know there was ag up there by the border. And the-
Yeah.
and
Do
the
you- oh, you want me to
development
just go
there.
back up?
Yeah.
And tell me if you want this expanded, I mean, made larger
No, this
or-
has been helpful.
That is?
Yeah. Do you want to run it? You're more than welcome to, since,
Yeah, so there is a chunk of South Fork Windchuck here, and that little small one there.
There's like no roads to get to that.
Yeah, there is. If they brought it on down, it goes into. Get to where? To this, to up on the very top of the map.
Right
there.
Let's put it this way, there's no roads to
There's no
legally
road to-
export your product.
Exactly. You
I
have
mean, it's not from Oregon.
That's it.
Because you can't cross the state border with it.
You have to come into there from Oregon up the Windchuck. Oh, right.
You know, we've got
We'll
some of
talk
that
about that
property up
later.
in Sunstar.
Talk
We've got
about
no
that.
Export product.
So yeah, so from what I'm seeing here, our whole ag indoor project is completely hosed.
Can you go down, Heidi?
Yes.
please?
There's a few there's a few small areas that isn't the dark green.
more, guys?
And if the general plan excludes it from all the dark green, then, I don't know, I'm ready to go home.
Would have to see a bit more maps in other areas, but yeah, basically,
That's done, look at it.
it's a smaller portion of properties on all of these sections.
Yeah, which creates a huge bubble in those areas, and then right across the street, nobody buys the house.
Right.
I mean, it's like,
Well, no, well, I guess as far as this map goes, for all intensive purposes,
this is
draw
very discouraging.
a straight line, kind of where that
The-
PF7 is. To the left of that, you're tied into existing buildings, and so.
in defense of this map, this is predominantly a coastal map too, and it has a lot of those better soils. So we can go to some other maps and maybe we'll see more of the other two shades of green.
Yeah, because on the right side of, 101 is going to be probably some more.
The one thing to remember
Right,
also
sure.
on this map that you're looking at, there's not a lot of actual buildings in the dark green properties. And so most of those properties weren't allowable anyway at the moment with the coastal zone zoning of not constructing.
Yeah, let's go down like the other, that's kind of the bulk of it, though. There isn't really much more inland ag land.
Chunk here.
Well, there's, no, okay, but a lot of the buildings would be centered on some of these darker green things down here, some of those other pieces up there. This is
Can you email this to us?
Kings
One
Valley
more
Road.
time?
See, like,
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
We can do that.
Yeah.
How's it? I never got it.
All right, we've got just a few minutes left. If we could wrap up with,
Do you want to zip down and look at the other maps real quick on here, or what? I think that was the bulk of it,
Hit some of
really.
these part maps.
there's a lot of ag zone properties as you go down through these maps, but.
Yeah, this is the Hayuchi map, so there's not a lot there,
Right.
which there wasn't.
No.
Okay,
No,
this
there's
would
nothing
be,
there.
this is three different,
Klamath map, the
199.
southern Crescent City map.
Gasky, and then Washington Flat,
That's good.
and then this would be kind
That's
of.
the one we want to see right there.
Oh,
There we go. There it is.
That's the same one.
Okay, so you have a lot of the east side of, or excuse me, west side of Lake Earl Drive, You have Elk Valley Road, and that's non-coastal, at least on the east side. The west side, once you get up here by Jordan Creek, but it also has the Gen Ag. So, yeah, Kings Valley.
City map has a lot of it on there.
Yeah. You want to click on that one?
Yeah.
So
For the purposes of limiting it, for the concern of caps,
All
the
coastal
board's
zone.
concern generally, what I'll be bringing to them is that, the general plan excludes, looking like 70% of the land. Granted that dark green is larger parcels, so it doesn't constitute the greatest number of parcels, but it's the greatest number of acres.
The greatest number of acres, however, it is omit mostly of structures on any of it, so it wouldn't have been usable anyway.
Sure.
So it's not really what we were talking about to
Sure.
begin with.
But it does have the effect of naturally limiting the total number that can happen, so that should make everybody feel better. Cool.
Okay.
Like, just as an aside, as we get closer to noon, as far as setting up the next meeting, I would just want to have it so I could call Kylie before
Yeah.
she leaves for lunch.
I'll go back
sure.
to Wednesdays. I know you're not going to be able to
Yeah,
be here, you said, but Wednesdays.
Next week I'm booked. Wednesdays is the best. I also, my wife suggested, I'm in town a lot more on Mondays, but did we
Okay.
already rule those out, or?
I'm fine with Monday. I don't care.
Doesn't
if-
bother me. I don't know if the chambers are always available Monday or not, but.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother me.
I can call, I mean, if we want to start with,
Yeah, let's check it
We
out.
could try to look into Mondays. I feel like we kind of tried to pick days in the beginning, and we found that
Yeah.
Wednesday was the day that this
I know.
was
It
generally
was just
open.
back then, there was something going on with the board on Monday.
I think there was,
but-
yeah.
Well, let's find out now.
Hey, I'm actually surprised you're not in Wisconsin, Blake.
Yeah, I know.
so
I've
it
got
would be
folks
this,
there.
it would be the next Monday, I mean, the whatever.
Yes,
that
we
we're asking
couldn't
for.
do
Okay.
it for
Madison.
So,
Wait,
Well,
the following Monday.
a
while we
week?
got a moment, I just want to say that, hopefully at some point we can, as a community get together and start talking about like a county-wide cooperative, an appellational cooperative. That's something I want to, if we do get this board disbanded or we have to remove ourselves from the boards for conflicts and stuff, which I'm fine with either way. I definitely think that, part of my next move forward would be to try to establish a county-wide cooperative so that we can all benefit from what Robert's saying, which is more product for marketplace. And if we can think outside of the box for our small little community and our small little county and consider starting something where we're banding together as groups of small growers, just like Blake has done with his dairy, I think we'd be a lot stronger that way. And that's when I think we'll make a large difference in the employment opportunities for this place. So.
On the 15th, how about from 9 to 11? There's another group that's supposed to be here at 11.
I can do that.
Well, knowing
Gotta
this
be in
would,
Sacramento that day.
Oh,
Actually, Davis.
Well, let's stick for next Wednesday then, since Blake can't be here anyway. And then if we want to switch back after that, we'll go for it.
Yeah, that was a stupid
How about
idea.
the follow, what about the next Monday? If I'd like to
From then
schedule a
on,
few-
yes. Well, maybe.
I'd like to schedule
Yeah.
a few in advance.
Yeah, I definitely,
Thanks.
Monday's a priority for me to be here.
Okay.
Answer your
we
co-op.
can do
call.
Wednesday. We can do Wednesday, this
Okay.
upcoming Wednesday.
Okay.
The 10th, from 10 to 12, and Kylie wanted me to remind Jessie to drop off whatever materials to her.
Definitely, that's my mission. Okay, so Wednesday the 10th, and then, are we going to change our agenda? We've been rolling with the same agenda.
It might be time.
The point
if
of
we-
that meeting, right, wasn't Joel saying that he wanted to have a meeting as quickly as possible after Tuesday?
to hear
So
his
that he
deal.
can present to us
Okay,
the proposed info from the board, right? That was
Okay.
what,
Sure.
that was
Yeah.
kind of the point of wanting to do another quick meeting.
And
What he was saying.
he also said that it would be available to us maybe that afternoon. So
Yeah, he
if
did
you
say
could-
that.
If you could email it out, that would certainly help me.
oh, Joel's work available to
Yeah.
us, right?
Yeah, he was going to email it Tuesday afternoon.
One of the item points for the next meeting would be to discuss whatever it was that
Joel's bringing.
Joel's bringing, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
Of course.
so we'll put that on the agenda then, I guess,
And then-
discuss draft ordinance.
And then move into.
And then we're done talking about all the stuff
The
we
next-
re-talked about again today,
Yeah,
right?
that's the one you all want to talk about.
Do you want it, should we just?
We need to
move
weigh in here
Timberland?
and make sure we're okay with consensus here.
I'm not going to be the only, spike in a tax strip.
Thank you.
So should we move to Timberland discussions then for
Please.
conservation?
Please, yes, I think
Okay.
yes, right? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so that would be the next
Okay.
outdoor zoning location
Yeah.
that we need to talk about, right?
Actually, I mean, can we clarify with Joel that we'll be capable of discussing outdoor cultivation and not find ourselves in a bind?
There's no clarification necessarily. Like, again, that's an opinion.
It was more of a facetious joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Joel's steering us away from micromanaging the details and trying to encourage us to create the structure, the formula.
Sounds like where I've wanted to be the whole time.
Yeah, correct.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so we got
All
the
right.
next Wednesday, and then we might try to switch to Mondays. I was going to try to schedule a few ahead, so we're going to meet this Wednesday, and then if that's okay, we'll look at Mondays.
Skip a week and then
That's
go.
perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
You would have to, skip a week.
Well, I wasn't going to, but would we have to? Would there be enough time?
You go from the 10th
Just that
to
I
the
won't be here.
15th.
I won't be here.
So skip it.
Next Monday, you won't be
The
here?
15th.
I won't be here.
Yeah, the 15th,
I don't have a
we
calendar.
didn't,
You would have to skip a Monday just by posting the
Yeah.
thing. It has to be posted. There's not enough time to post it
Yeah.
from Wednesday to Monday.
Okay, you can post it Thursday and have a meeting Monday.
which Monday?
It's
Or-
on the 15th, but Blake's not going to be here anyway.
Yeah, and I think that was the one where if
We
we
would
wanted to
start
do.
Mondays on the
Let's try
22nd,
to
I
meet the
guess.
17th of Wednesday?
I'm,
You're not
I mean,
meeting-
it's
are
a
we not
3-day
gonna try to
meeting.
keep meeting every week then? Do we wanna
We
skip?
just go to the 22nd.
And that's a Monday?
yes.
22nd, okay.
So the 11th and the 22nd?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just, we're skipping some time, but
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
down to
Okay.
meet.
Why don't we just wait, we could wait and call that to the next meeting.
Yeah, let's do
Yeah,
that.
just,
We'll schedule it at our next meeting.
check.
Yeah, either we'll go
All right.
another Wednesday or we'll try to make it.
All right, I'll just
Yeah.
do one then.
Yeah, okay.
Very good.
Very good. Comments back to the
Yeah.
co-op thing, and I have been part of quite a few co-ops and been involved with starting a few, and you need 3 people to start. I would encourage that really a group get started, start meeting, 5 or 10 people, whatever. You don't need to start, you mentioned countywide, well, that's fine. I mean, co-ops are, there's no borders.
Totally.
So it's whoever's involved.
There's a structure specifically for cannabis cooperatives that's been
I don't-
codified by
Yeah.
the state.
Sure, okay.
It's modeled after the agricultural cooperative you're familiar with, and it's
Yeah.
slightly
And,
different. but-
and I made that remark because, I just wanted to try to, to relay to Robert that there are ways that we can
Yep.
establish enough jobs here
Yep.
without having to
Eh.
go to a large-scale provider.
And one of the primary purposes of a co-op, right, it's really to gather your goods, to collectively bargain. And what that means is that you all agree that, it's worth X dollars per pound, and this is what we're fighting for.
Exactly.
And so,
I'm not saying you can't survive small.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you're not competing with a large producer here, because the state has large producers, you're already
Right.
competing with them. You know what I mean, whether it's.
yeah.
I don't want us to
located
even
here
try.
or-
I think that's a bad business model for Del Norte to even try to compete with large producers. I don't think that should be even, more power to you if you want to, but I don't think that we should be, fostering that necessarily. Do whatever you want.
Find
but
another marketing edge. That
Sure.
that would be my recommendation.
Turmeric flavored
Yeah.
cannabis.
Put it in milk, what the heck?
It's one thing that's
Thank
banned,
you.
actually. Can't put weed in milk.
Yeah, and I think we just to mention something else before noon here that maybe or maybe not doesn't need to be addressed. I don't know, but we got an email right from a constituent
Yes.
in the county, and
It's her second letter, by the way.
it was comments that were I guess negative cannabis. I would classify them as saying be careful of A, B, and C, and don't do this. Don't go forward with ordinance because, and every example in it cites Josephine County or something like similar to what's happening in Josephine County, which was cited many times in this thing. And I guess my comments towards that would be, this is exactly what we're doing. we are exactly making through the laws that have been put in place in the state of California and the laws that we're trying to put in place from the county is addressing all of that. None of this that we're doing allows what is happening and currently happening in Josephine County to be allowable. What's happening there is completely off the table. And so I guess I feel that what we're doing is exactly addressing this person's comments to us about don't let this happen. And now the comments were more geared towards don't let any cannabis happen, period, because you will become Josephine County. And so I guess my idea is towards that my comment would be we should let cannabis happen regulated the way we're doing it because that will make us not like Josephine County. So that just my 2 cents on that comment. It was getting that letter is no different than someone walking up to the podium here and addressing us, right? It's the same thing. And so
No, letters count for 2. To address Ms. Owens' comments specifically, I think her concerns are completely valid, and a lot of people in the community share those concerns. And although it was from the perspective of, I don't know if it was necessarily anti-cannabis, but an extreme concern for what can happen, I think she also was asking for care and consideration. She's asking for the board to pay attention and to make a good decision and to consider these issues, take them into account, take into account, you know, the mistakes of other communities. And I think we have been working really hard to avoid the mistakes of other communities. So. Thanks, Kurt, for
yeah, there were some
that.
comments on taxation and how are we going to get any money, and we've kind of addressed that already as well. You know, there's a tax ordinance going forward.
Vote for Measure B in
Please.
November. Cannabis business tax.
All right. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.